Dr. Zixathera stood before her classroom filled with students from across the galaxy. Her blue-scaled skin caught the light as she moved, and her forearms gestured with practiced precision. The vegan professor was known throughout Centauri Prime University for her sharp mind and sharper tongue. Today we discuss one of the most ridiculous myths in galactic military history, she announced, her voice carrying easily through the lecture hall. The supposed fighting prowess of humans. A few human students in the front row shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Zixathera noticed their reaction and smiled, showing rows of small, sharp teeth. Let us examine the facts, she continued, bringing up a holographic display. The average human male stands 1.8 meters tall and weighs perhaps 80 kilograms. Compare this to a Crovar warrior at 2.5 meters and 200 kilograms of pure muscle, or consider the natural weapons of other species. She gestured to her own claws, then to a Centaurian student whose crystalline skin could deflect energy weapons. Humans have no natural armor, no claws, no enhanced senses. Their eyesight is poor in low light. Their hearing range is limited. They cannot even see heat signatures without artificial aid. A human student raised his hand. Professor, what about human endurance? We can run longer than most species. Zixathera's laugh was like breaking glass. Ah yes, the famous human endurance. Very useful for running away from danger, I suppose. But in modern warfare with ships and energy weapons, how exactly does the ability to jog for hours help in battle? She clicked to the next slide, showing battle statistics. In every major conflict where humans have claimed victory, analysis shows they either had superior technology, overwhelming numbers, or were fighting already weakened enemies. Strip away their machines and gadgets and humans are helpless. The professor paced across the stage, her forearms moving as she spoke. Yet somehow propaganda has convinced the galaxy that humans are fearsome warriors. They speak of something called fighting spirit and berserker rage. This is simply psychology compensating for physical inadequacy. She pulled up footage from recent conflicts. Observe how humans conduct warfare. Chaotic, emotional, unpredictable. They call this adaptability. I call it panic masquerading as strategy. Professional military doctrine requires discipline, order, predictable responses. Human forces show none of these qualities. A Centaurian student spoke up. But Professor, humans have won several major battles against superior forces. Have they? Zixathera's eyes gleamed. Let us examine the Battle of Proxima III. Human forces were outnumbered 3-1 by Altarian shock troops. The humans supposedly won through superior tactics, but analysis of the battlefield shows the Altarians had been fighting for 6 standard months without resupply. They were exhausted, low on ammunition, and suffering from command structure breakdown. She switched to another battle scene, or the famous miracle of Kepler Station, where a human garrison held off a siege for 30 days. Impressive until you learn the attacking force was dealing with a plague outbreak that killed 40% of their troops. The human students looked increasingly uncomfortable. One young woman, Sarah Chen, raised her hand. Professor, what about the psychological studies showing human unpredictability gives them an advantage? Zixathera snorted. Unpredictability is not an advantage, Miss Chen, it is a liability. Military success requires careful planning, precise execution, and predictable responses from your forces. Human unpredictability means their own commanders cannot rely on them to follow orders. She brought up brain scans on the display. Human neurochemistry is flooded with emotion-producing chemicals. Adrenaline, norepinephrine, cortisol. These chemicals impair rational decision-making. They make humans prone to panic, rage, and other unhelpful emotional states. Other species have evolved past such primitive responses, she continued. Vegans like myself use pure logic in combat situations. Centaurians process information through crystalline neural networks that cannot be clouded by emotion. Altarians have collective consciousness that eliminates individual panic responses. A vegan student asked, then why do humans still serve in galactic military forces? Politics, Zixathera replied bluntly. Humans make up a significant portion of the galaxy's population. Their governments demand representation in military commands. Also, they are useful for support roles. Maintenance, logistics, communications, tasks that do not require actual fighting ability. She clicked to a new slide showing various alien species in combat gear. The galaxy's real warriors are obvious. Crovar with their enhanced cybernetics and pain tolerance. Altarians with their battle mech interfaces. Centaurians with their energy manipulation abilities. Each species has clear logical advantages. Humans? She shrugged. They tell stories. They write myths about their own greatness. They have convinced themselves that heart and spirit matter more than claws and armor. It is quite sad, really. Sarah Chen spoke again, her voice tight with controlled anger. Professor, my brother serves with the Galactic Defense Force. He's seen real combat. I am sure he has, dear, Zixthera replied condescendingly. Serving with competent alien forces, protected by their superior abilities, following their tactical leadership. Humans can be quite useful as support personnel. The professor noticed the time and began wrapping up her lecture. Your assignment for next week is to analyze any 3 human military victories and identify the non-human factors that actually determined the outcome. You will find that in every case, human success was due to alien technology, alien tactics, or enemy weakness. She was about to dismiss the class when her personal communicator chirped with an urgent priority signal. Frowning, she accepted the transmission. The image of Admiral Corax, a stern-faced Centaurian, appeared in the air. Dr. Zixithera, by order of the Galactic Defense Council, all available vessels and personnel are being mobilized for emergency evacuation duties. Vegan colony ships are under attack in the Outer Rim. The classroom fell silent. Zixithera's confident demeanor faltered slightly. Admiral, surely there are more qualified. Your research vessel, the Scholarly Pursuit, is the closest ship to the conflict zone with adequate life support for vegan civilians, Corax interrupted. You will depart within the hour. A human military liaison is being assigned to your vessel. The transmission ended, leaving Zixthera staring at empty air. The students began murmuring among themselves, but she barely heard them. Her mind was racing with implications. Class dismissed, she said absently. We will continue this discussion when I return. As the students filed out, Sarah Chen paused at the professor's desk. Professor, my brother serves in that sector. He's with the 47th Tactical Squadron. Zixithera looked at the young woman, noting the worry in her eyes. For a moment, her academic arrogance softened slightly. I am sure he will be fine, Miss Chen. Human forces excel at avoiding dangerous situations. Sarah's expression hardened. He doesn't avoid danger, Professor. He runs toward it when civilians need help. With that, the human student left, leaving Zixthera alone with her thoughts. She gathered her materials, mind already turning to the journey ahead. This would be an excellent opportunity to observe human military behavior in a real crisis situation. Perhaps she could gather data for a paper on human psychological responses to combat stress. She had no idea that everything she thought she knew about human warriors was about to be shattered completely. The myths she had spent her career debunking were about to reveal themselves as terrible, beautiful truths. The Scholarly Pursuit was not built for war. The research vessel hummed quietly through hyperspace, its laboratories and lecture halls now converted into emergency living quarters. Dr. Zixithera stood in what used to be her private study, watching cargo containers of medical supplies being secured for the journey ahead. She had expected the human military liaison to be some gruff, scarred veteran. Instead, Captain Sarah Chen appeared to be barely out of training. The woman was small even by human standards, perhaps 1.6 meters tall with a slight build. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a standard GDF uniform that seemed too big for her frame. Dr. Zixthera, Captain Chen extended her hand in the human greeting gesture. I'm looking forward to working with you. Zixthera reluctantly shook the offered hand, noting how soft and uncalloused it felt. Captain Chen, I must say you are not what I expected from a military officer. Oh? Chen smiled, seemingly unbothered by the comment. What were you expecting? Someone more imposing, battle-hardened. You look like you could be one of my students. Chen laughed, a sound that seemed far too light for someone heading into a war zone. I get that a lot. Don't worry, Professor. I promise not to get in your way during the evacuation. As they traveled deeper into space, Zixthera observed the human captain with growing bewilderment. Chen spent most of her time in the crew lounge, playing card games with the ship's largely alien crew. She told jokes, shared stories about her hometown on Earth, and generally acted like she was on vacation rather than heading toward mortal danger. Is this typical human military behavior? Zixithera asked Dr. Velox, the ship's Centaurian chief medical officer. Velox's crystalline features shifted in what passed for a shrug among his species. Human psychology is strange. Perhaps this levity is how they cope with stress. During their second day of travel, Zixthara decided to interview Captain Chen for her research. She found the human in the observation deck, staring out at the stars while doing what appeared to be some form of meditation. "Captain, may I ask you some questions about human military doctrine?" "Sure thing, Professor." Chen opened her eyes and gestured for Zixthara to sit. "What would you like to know? How do humans prepare mentally for combat situations?" Chen considered the question. "Well, we try to stay calm and focused. Fear's natural, but panic gets people killed. We train until our responses become automatic, so even when we're scared, we can still function. And the emotional responses? How do you control them?" "We don't try to eliminate emotions entirely," Chen said. "That would be like trying to fight with one hand tied behind your back. Emotions give us information and motivation. The trick is learning which emotions to listen to and when." Zixthara made notes on her data pad. "But surely you recognize that emotional responses impair rational decision-making." "Sometimes," Chen agreed. "But sometimes pure logic isn't enough. Sometimes you need to care about something more than your own survival to make the hard choices." Before Zixthara could ask another question, the ship's communication system crackled to life. "Captain Chen to the bridge. Priority message incoming." Chen excused herself and jogged toward the bridge. Zixthara followed, curious to see how the human would handle real military communications. On the bridge, Captain Valdris, a four-armed Altarian, was coordinating with the fleet. "We're receiving distress signals from multiple colony ships. The Krovar have deployed death dancers." Zixthara saw Captain Chen's entire demeanor change in an instant. The casual, joking young woman vanished, replaced by someone whose eyes had gone cold and calculating. Chen moved to the tactical display with predatory grace. "How many ships?" Chen asked, her voice now crisp and professional. 15 colony vessels, total population around 50,000. 3 are completely dark. 7 are showing partial power. 5 are still maneuvering but report boarding parties." Chen studied the tactical readout with intensity that made Zixthara uncomfortable. "Krovar death dancers don't usually operate in groups this large." "What's their objective?" "Unknown," Valdris replied. "But their attack pattern suggests they're not trying to destroy the ships quickly. They're taking their time with each target. They're hunting," Chen said quietly. "Death dancers view combat as an art form. They'll want to savor this." The casual tone was gone completely now. Chen began issuing rapid tactical assessments, coordinating with other ships in the rescue fleet, and analyzing Krovar battle patterns with a speed that impressed even the alien officers. "Dr. Zixthara," Chen said without turning around, "I recommend you prepare medical facilities for trauma cases. Krovar death dancers are creative in their violence." Over the next several hours, Zixthara watched Chen work with growing confusion. This was not the disorganized, emotional human she had expected. Chen's responses were precise, logical, and devastatingly effective. She seemed to anticipate enemy movements before they happened. When they received detailed scans of the colony ships, Chen studied them with the intensity of a scholar examining ancient texts. "The death dancers are herding civilians into central locations," she observed. "They want an audience for their work." "How can you be certain?" asked Valdris. "Because that's what I would do if I were them," Chen replied, her voice flat and emotionless. "Maximum psychological impact, maximum terror. It's not enough to kill efficiently. They want to break their victims mentally before they finish them physically." Zixthara found herself taking notes furiously. This analytical coldness was nothing like the laughing woman from the crew lounge. It was as if Captain Chen had become an entirely different person. "What's our best approach?" Valdris asked. Chen was quiet for several minutes, studying the tactical display. When she finally spoke, her voice carried absolute certainty. "We can't save everyone. The 3 dark ships are already lost. Our priority has to be the ships with the most survivors and the best chance of successful evacuation." "That seems rather callous," commented Dr. Velox. Chen turned to look at the Centaurian, and Zixthara was disturbed by the complete lack of emotion in the human's eyes. "Callous would be getting more people killed trying to save those who are already dead. We save who we can save." As they approached the battle zone, Chen requested permission to speak with the other ship captains. Zixthara listened as the human outlined rescue, priorities, and tactical approaches with military precision that would have impressed a Krovar general. "The death dancers will try to draw us into prolonged engagements," Chen explained to the fleet commanders. "They want us to fight on their terms. Instead, we hit fast, extract survivors, and move to the next target. No heroics, no attempts to engage them in personal combat. What if they pursue our evacuation shuttles? Asked a vegan captain. Chen's smile was sharp as a blade. Then they'll discover why humans have a reputation for unpredictability. After the communication ended, Zixthera approached Chen. Captain, I must admit I'm surprised by your tactical acumen. Your approach seems very non-human. How so? It's logical, dispassionate, focused on efficiency rather than glory. Everything I've read suggests humans are driven by emotion in combat situations. Chen looked at her for a long moment. Professor, we're not in combat yet. This is just planning. When the shooting starts, then you'll see what human combat behavior really looks like. And what is that? Chen's expression grew distant. Chaos, Professor. Beautiful, terrible chaos. As the scholarly pursuit dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, Zixthara got her first look at a real battle zone. Colony ships drifted like wounded animals among the wreckage of escort vessels. Energy weapon fire lit up the darkness between hulls, and somewhere in that maze of metal and death, Crover death dancers were practicing their deadly art on helpless civilians. Captain Chen stood at the bridge viewport. No longer the casual young woman or the cold tactician, she had become something else entirely, something that made Zixthera's scales itch with primitive warning signals. Time to go to work, Chen said softly, and for the first time since meeting her, Zixthera believed this small human might actually be dangerous. The colony ship New Harmony hung in space like a broken bird. Emergency lights flickered along its hull, and sections of the vessel showed obvious signs of forced entry. Through the tactical display, Dr. Zixthera could see heat signatures moving inside the ship. Some were clustered in what appeared to be safe rooms. Others moved with predatory purpose through the corridors. 3,000 civilians aboard that ship, Captain Chen reported, studying the sensor readings. 12 heat signatures matching Crover Death Dancer enhancement patterns. Admiral Corax's voice crackled over the communication system from his command ship. New Harmony is too heavily infested. We focus on ships with better survival odds. Negative, Chen replied immediately. New Harmony has the highest concentration of survivors. If we abandon them, the Death Dancers will make sure every other civilian in the fleet knows about it. Psychological warfare works both ways. Zixthera watched the human captain with growing confusion. Chen's tactical analysis was sound, but surely she understood the impossibility of the situation. 12 Death Dancers against a boarding party would be suicide. Captain Chen, Admiral Corax said carefully. Crovar Death Dancers have never been defeated in close combat. Their cybernetic enhancements make them faster and stronger than any natural species. Their pain tolerance is beyond measurement. I understand, Admiral. Do you? The Centaurian's crystalline features showed deep concern. A full squad of Altarian battle troops was slaughtered by just 3 Death Dancers last month. These are not ordinary soldiers. Chen was quiet for a moment, then smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Admiral, respectfully, Altarians fight like machines. They're predictable, logical, efficient. Death Dancers have learned to counter that approach. And humans fight differently? Humans fight like humans, Chen said simply. I'm taking a boarding party to New Harmony. Before Admiral Corax could object, Chen had cut the communication link. She turned to face the bridge crew, and Zixthera was startled by the change in the human's posture. Chen stood differently now, balanced on the balls of her feet like a predator ready to spring. I need volunteers, Chen announced. Full disclosure, this is probably a one-way trip. Every human crew member on the bridge immediately stepped forward. 3 other humans appeared from elsewhere on the ship within minutes, all moving with the same predatory grace that had overtaken their captain. You're all insane, Dr. Velox observed. This violates every principle of military logic. Sergeant Martinez, a scarred human male, grinned. Doc, if we wanted to be logical, we'd have stayed home and become accountants. Zixthera found herself speaking before she could think. I'm coming with you. The bridge fell silent. Chen stared at her. Professor, this isn't an academic exercise. You are about to provide the definitive test of my theories about human combat effectiveness, Zixthera replied. I will not miss the opportunity to observe firsthand. Chen studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Stay behind us, stay quiet, and do exactly what we tell you. If you become a liability, we'll leave you behind. 20 minutes later, Zixthera found herself in an assault shuttle heading toward New Harmony. The 5 humans had transformed completely. Gone were the casual clothes and relaxed attitudes. They wore black combat gear that seemed to absorb light, and their faces were painted with patterns that made them difficult to look at directly. "Remember," Chen said as they approached the colony ship, "Death Dancers feed on fear and pain. They want us to fight them in open combat where they can show off their skills. We don't give them that satisfaction." "What's the alternative?" asked Corporal Zhang, checking her weapon. "We hunt them like animals," Chen replied matter-of-factly. "No honor, no fair fights, no sporting chances. We kill them as efficiently as possible and move on." The shuttle docked with New Harmony's emergency airlock. As they moved through the decompression cycle, Zixithera noticed the humans had gone completely silent. They communicated through hand signals that flowed like a language she couldn't read. The moment they stepped into the colony ship's corridors, Zixithera understood she was in the presence of something extraordinary. The humans moved through the darkened hallways like ghosts, their footsteps making no sound despite their heavy equipment. They navigated by instinct, seeming to know which corridors to avoid and which shadows would hide them. "How do they know where to go?" Zixithera whispered to Chen. "Experience," Chen whispered back. "Every species builds ships the same way. Humans have been fighting in enclosed spaces for thousands of years. They found the first evidence of the Death Dancers' work in a passenger compartment. Zixithera had to fight not to vomit at the sight. The Krovar warriors had taken their time with these victims, turning murder into a grotesque art form." Chen knelt beside one of the bodies, studying the wounds with clinical detachment. "Fresh, they're still in this section." Sergeant Martinez tapped his ear. "I've got movement 2 levels up. Multiple contacts, civilian and hostile." "They're herding them toward the observation deck," Chen said after checking her data pad. "Maximum visibility, multiple escape routes for the hunters. Classic Death Dancer setup." "So what do we do?" Zhang asked. Chen's smile was terrifying. "We break their toys." What followed challenged everything Zixithera thought she understood about human limitations. Instead of charging toward the Death Dancers, the humans began systematically destroying the ship's infrastructure. They cut power lines, rerouted atmospheric controls, and sabotaged artificial gravity in specific sections. "You're disabling the life support," Zixithera protested. "The civilians will die." "The civilians are already dead if we fight this conventionally," Chen replied, her hands moving rapidly over a control panel. "Death Dancers rely on enhanced cybernetics. Those systems have weaknesses." Within minutes, the section of ship where the Death Dancers operated became a nightmare of fluctuating gravity, cycling temperatures, and strobing emergency lights. Through the ship's internal sensors, Zixithera watched the enhanced warriors struggle with environmental conditions their cybernetics couldn't compensate for. Their enhanced reflexes depend on predictable conditions, Chen explained as she led the team through maintenance tunnels. Change the rules and their advantages become liabilities. They reached a position above the observation deck where the Death Dancers had corralled nearly 1,000 civilians. Through a maintenance grate, Zixithera could see the Krovar warriors moving among their captives like predators selecting prey. The Death Dancers were magnificent in their way. 3 meters tall, their bodies were works of art combining organic tissue with advanced cybernetics. Their movements were fluid, precise, designed to inspire terror and admiration in equal measure. "Beautiful, aren't they?" Chen whispered, and there was something in her voice that made Zixithera's blood run cold. "Captain, they've spent centuries perfecting the art of killing. Enhanced strength, enhanced speed, enhanced pain tolerance. They're apex predators." Chen's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Unfortunately for them, humans didn't get to the top of Earth's food chain by being fair. The humans struck without warning. They dropped through ceiling panels into the midst of the Death Dancers, not to fight them but to scatter them. Smoke grenades filled the observation deck with choking clouds that confused the Krovar's enhanced senses. Zixithera watched in amazement as the humans began herding the civilians toward emergency exits while simultaneously engaging the Death Dancers in hit-and-run attacks. They never stood and fought. They appeared from shadows, fired precise shots at critical cybernetic components, then vanished before the Death Dancers could respond. "This is not combat," she muttered. "This is hunting." One of the Death Dancers, a female with silver cybernetic limbs, cornered Sergeant Martinez in a side corridor. She was faster, stronger, and armed with weapons that could cut through ship's armor. Martinez should have died in seconds. Instead, he smiled. The Death Dancer hesitated, confused by the human's reaction. In that moment of uncertainty, Martinez triggered an explosive charge that brought down the corridor ceiling. Neither the Death Dancer's speed nor her strength could overcome simple physics and several tons of falling metal. "Efficient," Chen commented over the comm system. "Martinez, check on the civilians in Section 7. "Copy that, Captain." Through it all, Zixithera noticed something that challenged her scientific understanding. The humans weren't fighting like separate individuals. They moved like a pack, anticipating each other's actions, covering each other's weaknesses, maximizing each other's strengths. "How are they coordinating so effectively?" she asked Chen during a brief lull. "Training," Chen replied, "and something your species has trouble understanding." "Which is?" Chen looked at her with eyes that seemed far older than her apparent age. "We trust each other absolutely. When Martinez goes into a dangerous corridor, he knows Zhang will cover his retreat. When Zhang takes a risk to save civilians, she knows I'll make sure she gets out alive. That's not military doctrine, Professor. That's family." The battle for New Harmony lasted 3 hours. When it ended, 4,700 civilians had been evacuated safely. All 12 Death Dancers were dead, though their bodies showed none of the artistic wounds they preferred to inflict on their victims. They had been killed with brutal efficiency, like animals put down by exterminators. As they returned to the colony ship, Children's Hope should have been an easy rescue. Initial scans showed only 3 Death Dancers aboard, far fewer than the dozen they had faced on New Harmony. The civilian heat signatures were concentrated in the ship's educational wing, suggesting the inhabitants had managed to establish a defensive perimeter. Dr. Zixithera suited up for her second boarding mission with growing confidence. She had witnessed human tactical competence firsthand. While unconventional, their methods were undeniably effective. She made notes on her datapad about environmental manipulation and psychological warfare, already planning the papers she would write. "Something's wrong," Captain Chen said as their shuttle approached the docking port. Her voice carried a tension that hadn't been there during the previous mission. "The scans show only 3 hostiles," Sergeant Martinez pointed out. "Should be manageable." "That's what bothers me," Chen replied. "Death Dancers don't usually operate in groups this small. 3 warriors could take a ship this size, but they'd want more for the kind of extended hunt they prefer." Corporal Zhang checked her weapon. "Maybe the others are dead?" "Ship security might have gotten lucky." Chen shook her head. "Death Dancers don't die to ship security. If there are only 3 left, it's because they sent the others away for a reason." As they docked and moved through the airlock, Zixithera noticed the humans were moving differently than before. Their casual efficiency had been replaced by hypervigilance. They checked every corner twice, moved in tighter formation, and communicated with sharp, minimal gestures. The first thing they found was the ship's security team, or what remained of them. The bodies were arranged in a deliberate pattern, their weapons placed just out of reach of their outstretched hands. It was artistry and psychological warfare combined. "They're making a statement," Chen observed, kneeling beside one of the bodies. "This isn't random violence. They want us to know they're in complete control." "Captain," Zhang called from a nearby corridor, "you need to see this." They followed Zhang to a large viewing window that looked into the ship's main educational center. Inside, nearly 2,000 civilians huddled in family groups while 3 Death Dancers moved among them with predatory grace. But it was what Zixithera saw in the center of the room that made her heart skip. Children, dozens of them, separated from their parents and arranged in rows. They sat perfectly still, faces pale with terror, while one of the Death Dancers circled them like a teacher giving a lesson. "They're using the children as bait," Martinez said, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. Chen was silent for a long moment, studying the scene below. When she spoke, her voice was flat and emotionless. "No, this is something else. Death Dancers kill for art and pleasure. This..." She trailed off, her expression growing distant. "Captain?" Zhang prompted. "They're not hunting," Chen said quietly. "They're playing. Those children aren't bait. They're toys." Zixithera watched Captain Chen's face change. It was subtle at first, a tightening around the eyes, a slight clenching of the jaw, but something fundamental was shifting in the human's demeanor. "New plan," Chen announced. "Zhang, Martinez, get the civilians out through the emergency airlocks. Evacuate everyone except the children." "What about the kids?" Martinez asked. Chen's smile was unlike anything Zixithera had ever seen. It was predatory, yes, but more than that. It was the expression of something that had decided to stop pretending to be civilized. "I'll handle the children." "Captain, those are death dancers," Zhang protested. "You can't take 3 of them alone. Watch me." Before anyone could stop her, Chen had sealed the blast door behind her and dropped through a maintenance hatch into the educational center. Zixthera pressed her face to the viewing window, watching in horror and fascination as the small human woman walked calmly into a room containing 3 of the galaxy's most dangerous predators. The death dancers noticed her immediately. They moved with liquid grace to surround her, their enhanced senses analyzing her threat level. They found her lacking a single human. The largest death dancer's voice carried clearly through the room's speakers. "How disappointing. We were hoping for more entertainment." Chen ignored them completely. She walked to the center of the room where the children sat, her movements calm and unthreatening. Kneeling beside a small vegan girl who couldn't have been more than 6 years old, Chen spoke in a voice too soft for the room's sensors to pick up. Whatever she said, the effect was immediate. The children's posture changed from frozen terror to determined calm. They began moving in response to Chen's quiet instructions, forming tight groups and moving toward the room's emergency exits. "I don't think so," the lead death dancer said, moving to block the children's path. "They stay until we're finished with our game." Chen stood slowly, turning to face the enhanced warrior, and for the first time since Zixthera had met her, the human captain looked genuinely angry. "Let them go," Chen said simply. The death dancer laughed, a sound like breaking metal. "Or what, you'll file a complaint with your admiralty?" Chen's response was to smile. But this wasn't the tactical expression Zixthera had seen before. This was something primal, something that spoke to genetic memories of ancient predators in dark forests. "Or I'll show you why humans have a reputation," Chen replied. What happened next challenged everything Zixthera understood about physics. Biology and combat dynamics. Chen moved, not with the enhanced speed of cybernetics or the measured precision of military training. She moved like a force of nature, like controlled lightning, like death given form and purpose. The first death dancer never had a chance to react. Chen's combat knife found the gap in his cybernetic armor before his enhanced reflexes could register the attack. She used his falling body as a springboard to reach the second warrior, her movements flowing like water around his defensive strikes. But it was when the third death dancer managed to land a blow that Zixthera saw something that would haunt her dreams. The enhanced fist struck Chen in the ribs with enough force to shatter bones. Zixthera heard the impact echo through the room. Chen absorbed the blow, smiled, and kept fighting. She should have been crippled. The force of that strike should have sent her flying across the room. Instead, she used the impact to drive her own attack home, her knife sliding between cybernetic plates with surgical precision. "Impossible," Zixthera whispered. "No natural species can withstand that kind of damage." Through the viewing window, she watched Chen systematically dismantle 3 enhanced warriors who should have been able to kill her with their bare hands. The human moved like violence personified, taking injuries that would have felled any other species and responding with attacks that found every weakness in her opponent's defenses. The death dancers. Enhanced strength meant nothing when Chen used their own momentum against them. Their enhanced speed became a liability when she anticipated their movements before they made them. Their enhanced pain tolerance was meaningless when she targeted neural pathways and cybernetic control nodes. When the last death dancer fell, Chen stood among the bodies, breathing hard but still upright. Her uniform was torn and bloody, but she moved to the children as if nothing had happened. "It's okay now," she told them, her voice gentle once again. "The bad things are gone. Your parents are waiting for you." As the children filed out through the emergency exits, reuniting with their families in the evacuation shuttles, Zixthera found herself staring at Captain Chen with new understanding. "How?" she asked when Chen finally made it back to their position. "How what? How did you survive those impacts? How did you move that fast? How did you defeat 3 death dancers in single combat?" Chen looked at her with eyes that seemed far older than her apparent age. "Professor, you've been studying humans for years, but you've never understood what we really are. Then tell me." Chen was quiet for a moment, looking back at the room where the children had been held captive. "We're persistence hunters, Professor. Back on Earth, we hunted mammoth and saber-toothed cats with nothing but pointed sticks and stubbornness. We didn't survive because we were the strongest or the fastest. We survived because we were the most willing to keep going when everything else gave up. She touched her ribs where the death dancer had struck her, and Zixathera saw her wince. That warrior hit me hard enough to break bones. But I've been hurt before. Pain is just information, and I had more important things to worry about than my own discomfort. The children, Zixathera said, understanding finally dawning. The children, Chen agreed. You want to know what makes humans dangerous in combat? It's not our technology or our tactics or our training. It's that we fight hardest when we're protecting something we love. As they made their way back to the shuttle, Zixathera found herself seeing Captain Chen in an entirely new light. This small, soft-spoken woman had just accomplished something that should have been impossible. She had faced down 3 enhanced predators and won through sheer determination and an absolute refusal to quit. Professor, Chen said as they reached the shuttle, you asked me earlier what typical human military behavior looks like. Yes. Chen's expression grew distant again. That wasn't it either. What you just saw was what happens when you... Dr. Zixathera sat in the medical bay of the scholarly pursuit, her 4 hands moving with practiced precision as she treated Captain Chen's injuries. The human had 3 broken ribs, extensive bruising, and what should have been a concussion. Yet she was conscious, alert, and arguing with the medical scanner's recommendations for extended bed rest. I need to check on the evacuation status, Chen insisted, trying to sit up on the medical table. You need to rest, Zixathera replied firmly, gently pushing the human back down. Your body has sustained significant trauma. Bodies heal. Those civilians need... The civilians are safe, Dr. Velox interrupted, entering the medical bay. The Centaurian's crystalline features showed what passed for amazement among his species. Final count. 47,000 civilians evacuated successfully. 0 fatalities among the rescued populations. Chen's relief was visible, her tense posture finally relaxing. Good. That's good. Zixathera continued her examination, noting how the human's vital signs stabilized now that she knew the mission was successful. Captain, I must ask you something. During the fight with the death dancers, you sustained injuries that should have incapacitated any natural species. How were you able to continue fighting? Chen was quiet for a moment, staring at the ceiling. Professor, have you ever loved something more than your own life? The question caught Zixathera off guard. That is not a scientific inquiry. It's the most important scientific inquiry you could ask about humans, Chen replied. Everything you don't understand about us comes down to that single question. Dr. Velox moved closer, his sensors scanning Chen's brain activity. Fascinating. Her neurochemistry shows elevated levels of adrenaline, norepinephrine, and something I've never seen before in combat situations. What? Zixathera asked. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone. Captain Chen, during the battle, you were experiencing the same neurochemical state as a parent protecting their offspring. Chen smiled weakly. Those children weren't my species, Professor. Hell, some of them weren't even mammalian. But when I saw them sitting there, terrified and helpless, something in my brain said, mine to protect, and everything else became secondary. Zixathera processed this information, trying to fit it into her understanding of combat psychology. So human military effectiveness is based on emotional attachment? Not just attachment, Chen corrected. Love. Humans fight hardest when we're protecting something we love. Our families, our homes, our friends, our ideals, even strangers we've decided to care about. But love is a weakness, Zixathera protested. It clouds judgment, impairs logical decision-making, creates unnecessary emotional vulnerabilities. Chen's laugh was soft and sad. Professor, you've been studying war for years, but you've never understood what war really is. Enlighten me. Chen struggled to sit up again, and this time Zixathera didn't stop her. War isn't about who has the biggest guns or the fastest ships or the most advanced technology. War is about who wants to win more. And humans. We want to win because losing means the things we love get hurt. Dr. Velox checked his readings again. The neurochemical analysis supports her claims. Humans in protective emotional states show increased pain tolerance, enhanced reaction times, and elevated physical performance. It's as if love makes them more than their biology should allow. Zixathera found herself thinking about everything she had witnessed during the evacuation. The humans' seemingly chaotic tactics that had proved devastatingly effective. Their willingness to take impossible risks. Their ability to function as a unit despite being different individuals. The myths, she said slowly. The stories about human warriors. They weren't exaggerations. No, Chen agreed. They weren't, but they also weren't the whole truth. What do you mean? Chen looked out the medical bay's small viewport at the stars beyond. The myths make it sound like humans are natural warriors, born killers who love battle. That's not true at all. Most humans hate violence. We find war traumatic and destructive. We'd rather be gardening or writing poetry or raising children. Then why are you so effective at it? Because when something threatens what we love, we become whatever we need to become to protect it. Gardeners become soldiers. Poets become tacticians. Parents become predators. Chen's voice grew quiet. We don't fight because we love war, Professor. We fight because we love what war protects. Over the next several hours, as the evacuation fleet made its way back to safe space, Zixthera found herself having conversations with other humans aboard the ship. Sergeant Martinez told her about his daughter back on Earth, how thinking about her smile had kept him moving during the worst moments of the battle. Corporal Zhang showed her pictures of her elderly parents, explaining how the need to see them again had made her willing to face impossible odds. None of them spoke of glory or honor or the thrill of combat. They spoke of love, responsibility, and the determination to ensure that the things they cared about remained safe. Your species confuses us, Dr. Velox admitted during one of their conversations. Centaurians understand duty, obligation, logical necessity. But this emotional drive you describe, it seems so inefficient. Maybe, Zixthera replied, watching Captain Chen interact with some of the rescued children. The human was teaching them a simple game, her gentle manner giving no hint of the violence she was capable of. But perhaps efficiency isn't the most important factor in survival. When they finally reached Centauri Prime, Zixthera accompanied Chen to the debriefing with Admiral Corax. The Centaurian's crystalline features showed deep confusion as he reviewed the mission reports. Captain Chen, your tactical approach violated every principle of military doctrine. You engaged superior forces in close combat, ignored established evacuation protocols, and took unnecessary risks that should have resulted in massive casualties. Yes, sir, Chen replied calmly. And yet you achieved a complete evacuation with 0 civilian casualties and neutralized 15 death dancers with a team of 5 humans. Corax paused, his photonic processors clearly struggling with the contradiction. How do you explain this success? Chen glanced at Zixthera before answering. Admiral, we did what needed to be done to protect innocent lives. Everything else was secondary. After the debriefing, Zixthera walked with Chen to the shuttle that would take the human back to her ship. Captain, I owe you an apology. For what? I spent years ridiculing human military capabilities without understanding what those capabilities actually were. I mistook your greatest strength for weakness, Chen smiled. What strength is that, Professor? Your capacity to love something more than yourselves. It makes you willing to attempt the impossible and somehow succeed. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Chen spoke again. Professor, may I ask you something? Of course. What will you tell your students when you get back to teaching? Zixthera considered the question carefully. I think I'll tell them that humans are not natural warriors in the traditional sense. You're something far more dangerous than that, which is, you're a species that can choose to become warriors when others cannot protect themselves. You're gardeners who become wolves, scholars who become soldiers, parents who become predators. The galaxy's mistake isn't overestimating human military prowess. It's underestimating the power of a species that fights not because they love war, but because they love what war protects. Chen's expression grew thoughtful. That's a pretty good assessment, Professor. As Chen's shuttle departed, Zixthera made her way back to her office at the university. She had lectures to prepare, research to update, and an entire worldview to reconstruct. Her first lecture upon returning would be very different from her last one. She would tell her students about witnessing humans in battle, about seeing ordinary people transform into something extraordinary when faced with the suffering of others. She would explain that human unpredictability wasn't a flaw but a feature, that their emotional nature wasn't a weakness but the source of their strength. Most importantly, she would tell them that the myths about human warriors weren't myths at all. They were warnings about what happened when a species that valued love above survival decided that something was worth protecting. In her final notes, she wrote, The galaxy has spent centuries trying to understand human military effectiveness through the lens of traditional warfare. We analyzed their technology, their tactics, their training. We missed the most important factor entirely. Humans don't fight to win, they fight to protect. And there is no force in the universe more dangerous than someone fighting to protect what they love. She paused, then added one final observation. We called them myths because we couldn't believe such dedication was possible. We were wrong. The myths were never about human superiority. They were about human determination. And determination, it seems, can overcome any odds.